The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus went across the Sea of Galilee. A large crowd followed him because they saw the signs he was performing on the sick. And Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. The Jewish feast of Passover was near. When Jesus raised his eyes and saw that a large crowd was coming to him, he said to Philip, "Where can we buy enough food for them to eat?" He said this to test him, because he himself knew what he was going to do. And Philip answered him, 200 days' wages worth of food would not be enough for each of them to have a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, the brother of Simon Peter, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what good are these for so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people recline." Now there was a great deal of grass in that place, so the men reclined, about 5,000 in number. Then Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed them to those who were reclining, and also as much of the fish they wanted. When they had their fill, he said to his disciples, "Gather the fragments left over so that nothing will be wasted." So they collected them and filled 12 wicker baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves that had been more than they could eat. When the people saw the sign he had done, they said, "This is truly the prophet, the one who is to come in the world." Since Jesus knew that they were going to come and carry him off to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain alone. Dear friends, the Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Please be seated.
Ang binasa nating Ebanghelyo ay more popularly known as the miracle of the multiplication of the loaves and fish. No, may kasamang isda. No? We know this. No? Kapag nababanggit itong kwentong ito, we're familiar with this. The multiplication, the miracle, ang pagpaparami ng tinapay at ng isda. And the most obvious dito sa kwentong ito ay kung paano naparami yung 5 tinapay at saka yung 2 isda. That's usually when you ask people, ano yung miracle doon? It's a miracle ng pagpapadami. No? But if you go through the story, the whole gospel part that we read today, particularly in the gospel that of John, no? Maraming maliliit na miracles na nakapasok dito sa napakalaking popular miracle ng pagpapadami ng tinapay at saka ng isda. And sometimes we tend to forget and not to focus on the small miracles because ando na nga grand na nga yung paano mo napadami yung 5 tinapay sa 2 isda. But if we go through the entire story, we would see that there are small miracles that contributed to this big miracle na pagpapadami ng tinapay tsaka ng isda. Ano yon? Una, maaari mong tingnan yung miracle that there is a boy who is willing to share kung ano man yung meron siya. There is that boy. Merong 5 tinapay at 2 isda. O bakit naman sa pagkadami-dami ng mga taong ando doon, yung isang bata lang, yung boy lang na yon, yung mukhang nakaisip na magbaon, no? In following the Lord, no? In listening to Him. Siguro hindi naman siya lang yung nakaisip na magbaon, but perhaps, no? What is so obvious about this boy is that alam niya na meron lang siyang 5 tinapay at 2 isda. And yet, the miracle is in the willingness to share even the little that he has. The willingness to share na yung isusubo na lang niya, that will help him and keep him sustained. And yet, he was willing. That in itself is a small miracle. And then there is the miracle of sufficiency. Pag kami hinihingi tayo sa Panginoon, lagi lang na merong parang sakto. Ito lang kailangan ko. Yan. But in this miracle of the multiplication, pagkatapos makakain nung 5,000 men, sa ibang ebanghelyo, meron pang nakasulat, 5,000 men not counting the children and then the women. Di mas marami yon, di ba? No? Dito na nga lang sa simbahan ngayon, outnumbered ang lalaki. No? Siguro ang ratio dito ay 4:1. No? Wala pa kasamang bata. No? Pagka inalaw mo pa yung mga bata, bit-bit yan. Lalo na pagpunta rito. No? Bit-bit yan. No? So most probably, it's more than just 5,000. No? And nung makakain, may sobra. Hindi lang sapat. May sobra pa. No? And that's the miracle of sufficiency. We worry a lot about kulang na yung bigas. We worry a lot about kulang na yung pagkain. We worry a lot about kulang na yung sahod. We worry a lot about saan kukunin yung pang-tuition. We worry a lot. And yet we have forgotten that we have a God who is not only giving us what is sufficient, what is sakto, kundi yung merong sobra. That in itself is a miracle. No? May sobra lagi kapag ka nanggaling sa Panginoon. Tapos andun yung miracle ng willingness to put things in God's hand. Madalas we take matters into our own hands. Not that it is bad. Madalas ganun, in a very practical way, kaya naman nating gawin. But in this particular story, we are being reminded to put matters in God's hands. Sapagkat when we put matters in God's hands, yung quality ng kinalalabasan ay nag-iiba, tumitingkad. You see? It's not just the miracle of the multiplication, but the quality. I'm very sure that when you eat the bread, no, hindi naman siguro magpaparami yung Panginoon ng tinapay na soso lang yung lasa. It must have tasted one of the best bread that they've tasted during that time. No? The quality. Di ba kapag ka inangat mo, alam ko kaya kong gawin pero kapag ka inangat mo yung isang bagay, and you ask God to do wonders in whatever small things that we do, iba yung kalidad na kinalalabasan. Iniangat mo, you put it in the hand of God. No? Marunong ako magluto, pero pagka si chef ang nagluto, umiiba. No? Marunong ako magluto ng pansit, pero kapag yung magaling magluto ng pansit, no, umiiba yung lasa. No? There is that certain kind of quality there. And then the last that I saw a miracle there is how was He able to make people stay? Diba? Sa isang ilang na lugar, been talking for a long time, no? Dito nga lang, sumobra lang ako ng 10 to 12 minutes dito sa homily, tutulugan nyo na ako. Of course, I'm not the Lord, no? At how was He able to make them stay without provisions? Galing, no? Jesus has that miracle of making people stay. The last miracle rings very close to me, particularly because yesterday I had a very long talk with a colleague who for a long time worked in one of our institutions. And then suddenly, sabi niya, hindi suddenly pala, no? Sabi niya, he thought of it for a long, long while, and then he already opted for an early retirement to work for a better paying institution, no? It was sad, but I was grateful for the time that he spent with us. But it made me ask the question, did we make enough effort to make people stay? In the gospel that we read today, the Lord made every effort to make people stay. Buhay natin, marami mga umaalis, di ba? No? May mga nilalayasan tayo. But have you ever asked the question, did we make enough effort to make people stay? Na, no? Small miracles in that grand kwento of the multiplication of the loaves and fish. No? Ang daming magaganda at maliliit na milagro na nasa loob nun. Perhaps miracles are happening also in our lives. Not just perhaps, we're sure of this. But with the same principle, we can ask the question, we all have 5 loaves and 2 fish. Hindi tayo walang-wala. Kaya nga minsan nakakainis kapag tawag nito, may nilalapitan ka, wala. Wala. Pagka yung tao nagbibilang ng wala, mabubuang yan. Sige nga, sabi ng aking professor, subukan mong magbilang ng kung ano yung wala ka sa buhay. Umaga hanggang hapon, hindi ka patapos. Gabi na, hindi patapos. Kinabukasan, buang ka na. Because you realize na wala, na ang daming wala. In the gospel that we read today, meron 5 tinapay, 2 isda. No? Oftentimes, we forget to count our blessings, what we have, and we realize only what we do not have. And that is sad. Another is in the gospel that we read today, we are being reminded that we all have an open line to the Lord. No? And even in practical matters, the apostles went to Jesus and told him, pauwi na natin sila. Saan tayo kukuha ng pagkain? There is an open line. We all have an open line with Jesus, with God. How do we take advantage of this open line? Do we put things into His own hands and ask for a blessing? Because I tell you this, that particular thing when we put in God's hand, nagbabago yung kalidad. My dear friends, we are a people who often compares and whine and complain. And how do we put matters in God's hands? Not that we do not exert effort. In the gospel, the apostles tried to find ways. Na nakakatuwa, no? They tried also to find ways, but their minds were limited. They did not see the possibility that the Lord can do miracles in their midst. Short-sighted. Too practical that left with very little imagination. Sa mga panahon na to, kapag tatanungin nyo po yung mga nasa industriya, yung mga nasa school setting, ang lagi mong maririnig na salita ay innovation, resiliency, sustainability, imagination. Sa Ebanghelyo, the apostles were not able to imagine how the 5 loaves and the 2 fish can feed the multitude. With a boy, it's possible. With Jesus, it was very, very possible. There was miracle because the boy was willing, was generous enough to share yung 5 tinapay at 2 isda. May sobra. Hindi lang sapat, may sobra. Ang tanong, what are we doing with the sobra sa buhay natin? Because for as long as we keep them, there will always be people who will be hungry. One last kwento. You still know the artistang si Audrey Hepburn, yung mga ka-generation ko dito, kilala pa yon, no? She's very beautiful. And even in her old age, she maintained her figure, no? And then one time, she was asked the question, Audrey, how did you keep your figure throughout these years? She only answered with one word. Sabi niya, share. True enough. Because when we share, miracles happen.